Hi everybody, really glad you're here. I'm Rick Ufford Chase, Mayor here in Newport, and I'm going to open the meeting with just some brief comments, and then the chair of the task force, John Manette, who's a member of council, will share a little bit about the history that we've been kind of working through, what we've been doing together for the last, it's been about 5 weeks now, I think, or maybe a little more. And then the members of the task force will make a presentation and kind of share a little bit of the deliberation that they've been through and some of their initial conclusions or findings. And I'll just say a word about that. This meeting is intended to get all the ideas and the comments and the concerns and the questions that we can from all of you in the community on the table. This group will be meeting one more time tomorrow evening for another meeting in which they will solidify their recommendations, which will then go to the council. So they have 2 days to think about those recommendations before the council has a special meeting on Wednesday night to consider changing the rates. So it's just a little bit of the process of where we are. So a couple of quick comments. One of the things that, first of all, I just want to express my gratitude to the members of the task force for water and sewer who have been meeting weekly but put in a lot of time behind the scenes to make these meetings happen and to come up with the data that we need to try and make the most conscious and thoughtful decisions we can. So I'm really grateful to all of you for all the time that you've put in over the last little more than a month. And I also really want to thank Pam and Ann in particular, who have attended every one of these meetings, and Pam has filmed all of them. And if you haven't yet checked in on the Newport reality TV show that Pam is creating for all of us, it's quite something to kind of watch the deliberations. And those are every one of our meetings for both this group and the Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices Task Force are available on NEK-TV for anyone who would like to watch them. So thank you, Pam, and thank you to NEK-TV for its service on this. And I don't mean to just gloss over Ann Chiarella's influence, because Ann has been asking many of the questions that this task force has been asking steadily, faithfully for a long time. And she's been asking them throughout the last month as well. So I just want to say I'm grateful, and it's been an education for me starting many months ago, so thank you. So that leads me to my second comment, which is one of the things that I think the task force has done very well and that I'm very grateful for is that while we have tried to be very honest about the situation, the financial situation in which we find ourselves, we have made no effort to try and go back and lay the blame for our current fiscal condition in any one place. And the truth is that if you ask any one of us, we can probably right now around this table point to different moments over at least the last 15 years, and probably some of us could go back before that to find some of the roots of the challenges that we're confronting today. So I just want to say that because we're going to make that same effort, and I'll be trying to monitor our effort to do that this afternoon. I'm going to do my level best this afternoon as the mayor and the moderator of this conversation to assure that we do not devolve into finger pointing or trying to cast blame, but rather that we focus on constructive solutions that are clear-eyed about where we are and what the situation is and the best way forward. So I'll ask all of you to make the same commitment that the members of the task force have made over the last little more than a month now. And then finally, I want to say one last thing, which is that when the new council was elected, new council members were elected, and I was elected mayor, one of the things that I immediately depended upon was my own lifelong conviction that more heads in the room are better than fewer heads in the room, and the greatest transparency we can bring to the process is by far and away the best way to move forward on any challenging issue. And that if we do those things together, if we work together as a community, we can solve any problem. And I am far more convinced of that now than I was 5 weeks ago. Both with this task force and with the Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices Task Force, we have smart people who are, like all of us in the room, I think, members of this community, residents of the community of Newport, who have asked really good questions and come up with some very thoughtful and thought-provoking answers. So I just want to say, while the challenges are significant, the resources available to us are significant as well, and I'm grateful for that too. So before I hand it over to John, if it's okay, and if anyone doesn't feel comfortable doing it, that's fine, but I'd like to just have folks say your name and, probably just your name, and unless you have something specific about the residence you live or where you live in Newport or something, We will have plenty of opportunity for folks to raise questions later in the meeting. But for now, just to help me especially, because I don't know all of you in the room, and I know that I'm probably not the only one. So if we could just start maybe with Lori and go through the room quickly. And as we do that, I'm then going to start a sign-up sheet just so we have a record of who's been present this afternoon. And I'll just ask you to each sign your name and address. And don't worry about where it says topic. We know what the topic is. So Lori, can you start us, please?
Yep, I'm Lori Grimm, resident of Newport, and I also serve on the financial task force.
Amy Curtis, I live down on the Bluffs.
Muriel Brown, also on the Bluffs.
Claire McIntyre, resident. Ann Shirella, resident.
John Ward, I live on Mount Vernon Street.
Robert Kostansky, my wife Kate.
Kostansky, residents.
Carolyn Tice. Carter Finnegan, a resident in City Council.
Tom Bernier.
Go ahead, Jim.
Tim Johnson, resident of Newport.
Andrew Touchette, Newport resident.
Rod Blaze, resident.
Jean Laser, resident.
Todd Laser.
Nicole, resident. Johnson.
Pam Ladd, resident.
Should we introduce the task force?
Yes, I was just going to ask John if you could do that as you introduce everyone else.
Sure, and I'm John Manette, and we can go right around and end with Jennifer.
Patrick Curley, SciSav, resident.
Carl King, Compass Drive, resident.
Paul Tice, Fernwood Circle, resident.
Jennifer Hopkins, Benjamin Street, resident, obviously.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, and again, John Manette, I live on Meadow Lane.
Oh, John, we have one person online.
Okay.
Valerie, can you introduce yourself as well, please?
Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm over on Barron Street.
Thank you.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi, Val. Okay, so we started just by trying to figure out what information we needed, and so we have 7 or 8 years worth of water and sewer budgets, for, information from prior audit reports, city reports, and so forth. We also obtained, thanks to the help of Jim and Stacy downstairs, a lot of information relating to billing usage, other information. We have 3 people on the committee who are number crunchers, Jennifer, Paul, and Patrick, without whose dedication to that task, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight with anywhere near the progress that we've made. We also dug into the underlying basis for water and sewer billing, starting with the state enabling statutes that govern what the city can and can't do. We obtained copies of the current city ordinances pertaining to water and sewer. We also obtained a copy of the 1980 agreement between the city of Newport and the village of Derby Center relating to sewer issues, and some of what we've obtained really relates to what we're characterizing as phase 2 of our process. Phase 1 of our process relates to dealing with the immediate problem, which in a nutshell is that income is less than expense in both water and sewer. So the immediate issue that we've been working on for the last few weeks is what do we need to do so that income and expense match, so that we have sufficient income to cover the expenses. The situation over the last several years is that the water and sewer accounts have been gradually working their way into greater and greater deficit situations. Expenses have gone up, income in the form of rate adjustments until fairly recently has not gone up to compensate. There was a period of 6 or 7 years where there were no rate increases whatsoever, but expenses kept going up. During that same time period, there was a significant loss of income on the sewer side in the form of the fees that Casella paid for processing leachate at the sewer plant. And without regard to anyone's feelings on the subject of Casella, which are irrelevant to the topic at hand, the reality is that a substantial piece of income was lost and nothing was done to adjust fees in other areas to offset the loss of income. The expenses of running the sewer plant did not drop by anywhere near the amount of income loss. The expenses, it's unclear to me from my layman's point of view whether expenses at the sewer plant dropped by more than a few $1,000s a year compared to the $180,000 loss of income. No adjustments were made to deal with that. So combining that with 7 years of no rate increases and questions that were raised about assumptions relating to the allocation of some overhead expenses of the city to water and sewer versus the general fund, primarily salary and benefits for folks in the city manager's office and the city clerk's office, which may have exacerbated the deficit and which were taken into account when the budgets were adopted a couple months ago, in the sense that some of the prior percentage allocations to water and sewer were reversed and reallocated back to the general fund, which assists with a small part of resolving the issue that we now have. So in any event, given that background, our task is looking at expenses are X dollars. We have only a percentage of X coming in on the income side. The underlying premise of both the state enabling acts for municipal water and sewer services and the city ordinances is that the council is supposed to adjust fees, the income side, to cover the expenses. The accounts are supposed to run essentially on a break-even basis, and water and sewer appear both under state law and under the ordinances to be treated independent of each other. In other words, the water side needs to be adjusted to cover water, the sewer side the same. So the immediate issue that we have, phase one of our process, is a very narrow and specific focus on what adjustments do we need to make so that the water account and the sewer account for the fiscal year from July 1, 2025 to June 30, 2026 are operating as close to a break-even basis as we can project. I mean, we know that we're never going to get it precise to the penny, obviously, because we can't predict, number one, how much water people are going to use a year and a half from now to the gallon. We have a general idea, but not a precise idea about it. The goal is to try to get it so that it's close. So that's been our immediate task, and Paul and Jennifer in particular can speak to the math that's been done to get to tentative recommendations and the assumptions that have been made to get to those recommendations, because they have been spending hours and hours crunching numbers behind the scenes. Without their work, we wouldn't know where we are at this point, frankly. So with that, I'll turn it over to the...
I'm ready.
Okay. So,
Paul, you should introduce yourself.
what's that?
You should introduce yourself
Oh.
and your background.
Yeah, so, I said before, my name's Paul Tice, resident. So my background is, I spent 20 28 years at the Champlain Water District in South Burlington, Vermont, state's largest water supplier. There, I started as a draftsperson and worked my way. When I left, I was the assistant general manager. So water holds a place near and dear to me. So that's what I bring to the table. Like John alluded to, what we have been focusing on phase one of this is a temporary stopgap water and sewer rate, to give us, to one, bring our rates closer to what a balanced budget would be, and two, buy us a little time to do more of a deep dive into a line-by-line budget review of the water and sewer budgets. So to get to the point where we are right now and what we are considering proposing to the council, we had to make we felt we needed to make three changes in the budget. First, water meters were distributed between the water and sewer budgets. So we pulled the water meters out of the sewer budget and put them completely into the water budget. And that plays a role when you're developing what your system value is. Everything water should be in water, everything sewer should be in sewer. We're not talking I forget what our total budgets are, but in the millions of dollars we're talking about, it's a small piece. It was 25,000 each budget. So that was the first thing we did. Then the second thing we did is we ended up removing the back truck out of sewer and water for a total of $140,000 to bring the total budget cost down to get what looked like our proposed rates were going to be more reasonable. Because when we first started this, we were looking at rate increases approaching 70% to balance the budget out. The third modification we did to kind of help offset the removing the back truck but still building a capital reserve fund is we put in a 5% capital fund amount to at least start a capital reserve fund to build, feeling that at that point, once it's building, then the council can decide if that is going to be used for a back truck or if at that point it needs to be used for something else.
Debt service. You added in debt service.
Yes, oh yes, and we also added in debt service for the new water storage tank that was missing out of the proposed budget. That was to the tune of $195,000 for the new water storage tank, which Tom tells us is going to be going online around in the July timeframe. So that payment will start coming due. Part of our struggles with crunching numbers, and I can't imagine how many hours Jennifer has back calculating stuff, but part of our struggle was that only 58% of the system is metered. So we are, we've got half of the system where we know where pretty much everything is going, and then we have another half of the system that we don't know if the water's being used, if it's system water losses, but based on billing, and Jennifer will explain this in more detail, we back calculated stuff. Now, we also looked at the cost to produce water and the cost to treat water, based on what our wells put out, what our budget is, and then what we treat versus what our budget is. And we kind of use that as a double check. The percentages that Jennifer came up with using the rate calculation and the percentages I came up with using the actual cost to produce numbers were within reason based on the assumptions we had to make. We chose to go with hers because they're lower, and I think we will be fine with that. Now, we're currently, and when this committee meets again tomorrow, we've got to go through everything again, but we are currently looking at a 36% increase in water and a 23 to 25% increase in sewer. What that will do on the water side, the proposed budget as it stands now would be 1.15 million, and the projected revenue would be 1.15 million. On the sewer, the proposed budget as the task force has laid it out, not the initial proposed budget that we were given. The proposed sewer budget from the task force is 1.73, and the projected revenue is 1.73. Along with those rate recommendations, we have a list of other recommendations going to the city council. In reviewing the budget spreadsheet for the city, what that spreadsheet did was it would take whatever the projected expenses were and move it over and say that that's what the revenue was to come in. We're recommending that city staff develop an actual income and rate spreadsheet, and then use those to balance things out so that they can easily enter what the budget is, develop a proposed rate, and do it that way. So that every year the council would vote on a proposed budget and proposed rate. The second recommendation we're putting forward to the council is to fast track all remaining meter installations. Because without those numbers, what Jennifer and I are crunching it's a guess. We're doing the best we can with what we have. Third, we think that it would be good if some city staff sat in on our task force meetings to sort of go through the budget. We've noticed in some areas where it's hard to tell what is a employee cost versus a material cost. So breaking out in categories, which summarizing the budget so it's easier to understand what you're looking at when you see the numbers. And then the fourth recommendation, which is one I previously mentioned, is making sure that sewer is in sewer and water is in water. The other thing we are going to recommend is that, or we believe we're going to recommend, is that the city council pass a special ordinance immediately to allow the shutting off of connections that are over 90 days overdue. currently don't do that. And there are some pretty large outstanding bills. In addition to that, we're suggesting, or we probably will be suggesting, that that same shutoff address refusal of entry and no response to meter installations. So in other words, if you're contacted because the city wants to put a meter in and you just ignore them, we need to get the meters in. And then our last recommendation is a long list of things for phase 2 of this task force. First on the list is a simpler and easier to understand rate and fee structure for the city. And then with more data, further assessment of the rates, review of each individual line item, review of the employee expenses across the budget, further review of the Derby contract, equipment budgeting across departments. What I'm referring to there is, say there's a backhoe, how much is water paying, how much is sewer paying, how much is streets paying? In conjunction with that, should it be done that way, or should streets take care of all the equipment and then there's interdepartmental billing when it is used for a water job or used for a sewer job? We feel that that's something that should be assessed. And then we would like to look at developing a policy for budgeting. In other words, you should be able to look at a line item, and when you ask what's in it, there should be a worksheet showing what is in that line item. And then next, an annual rate setting policy, which would go along with the annual water and sewer budget approvals. Developing a policy of not combining capital improvements and capital expenditures, keeping those separate. An improvement is classified different than an expenditure. And then review and propose a new water and sewer ordinance to bring it to more current way of dealing with things.
Okay, so what we told the bad news. I reviewed, what we started with 2 years worth of what we have for rate information, which is some metered information. We've got background of how much water is being pumped out of the well. We made some sort of gross assumptions, which is the only way to go, is that the water coming out of the well is being processed through the system and must be paid for at the end. So we got our, sort of amount of gallons that are going through. We know what we have been billing and estimate what we can bill on the ones that are missing, that are non-metered. So we just sort of work those figures. I spent a great deal of time backing information in and out. We've got metered rates, which might not be perfect, but they were designed. I guess I should announce, I think I'm the only one here who was on the original committee that developed those rates. So I understand those rates and sort of feel that they're valid. The rest of this committee can potentially overwhelm me on that, but be that as it may, we decided that if we were doing stopgap, we couldn't do anything but base everything on the information we had. Anything else would be just pie in the sky. So we based it on the old rate structure, thinking that in the future we'll tweak it in some way or totally replace it. There are good features and bad features to it. But we went back and forth with that information. We have some very good information. We do have some glitches where the meters are broken or the meters were going backwards. We had, one billing that had only $300,000 of extra billing in the billing cycle, which is rather major. It was almost 50% of the billing cycle was a total error of 4 meters. So it's very interesting. In reviewing the rate structure, I did go back to the original rates. We've had a couple of increases. The last increase that was done, we went up where we were doing whatever, it's 6 or 7% across the board. Water, sewer, whether you were metered or non-metered. We then, for some reason, ended up, the last rate increase got 28% increase, not fully on the sewer, but just on the non-metered sewer. So what we did do in adjusting these rates, and why a lot of them are sort of going up quite a bit, because sewer just went up, if you're non-metered, 28%. We're backing that back out to make the rate increase. That rate increase should have been 8% to match the metered, so we're going from there going forward. So any of the non-metered sewer users will not see the same percentage increase as the metered ones, but they all will be paying the same amount. And I think it's important to, make that distinction going forward. Everything else is straight across the board. So that is why the numbers took so long to crunch and try to work out. We, as Paul mentioned, we don't know what the loss is. We know how much our expenses are, and so we're back billing on things. And I don't know if there's anything else I can say. Otherwise, I'll confuse everybody with the rate structure.
I think I was hoping you would cover the going back on the previous rate.
Yeah.
Can you just say that part one more time, Jennifer? Because I think it's on a lot of people's minds, and I'm not sure I fully understand exactly how you're proposing it.
When the last rate increase went through,
Which was last fall.
it was, I think, 8% on the metered rate and 28% on the non-metered rate. So
Is that sewer?
This is just sewer, just sewer. So what that did was it threw out of whack, and some of our rate increases that have rounded here or there have eliminated what was the basis of our rate structure. And the basis of our rate structure, I guess I can look at everybody else for to ask the question.
Thank you.
Is that, I didn't want to be in the hot spot.
Yeah, you're good.
Is that people, we are assuming every household, normal household, is using 13,500 gallons. That you get as what is, we'll call it a connection fee. It's called the base fee on your bill. If you use over that 13.5 in what is our fixed cost, we've got fixed and variable costs, then you get billed for it. So the assumption is that all of this, and this is the backing out that had to do, is as a ratepayer, you are sort of given 13,500 gallons that you do not have to pay the fixed costs on. You have to pay the variable. So every 1,000 of gallons you use, you pay whatever it is, $2.42, I think is what it was. So what happened was when they took the non-metered sewer and increased it 28%, it threw everybody out of whack. So the residents who were metered got a very good deal, the non-metered ones did not. It's very important, and I think we handled this as a committee to begin with. Whether you're metered or not metered, we don't feel there should be a really significant penalty for those people who are not metered. We are not putting in meters in some places because we can't. We've gotten waylaid as a city in putting in the meters. So for now, we're backing up and making it so everybody is sort of on an even playing field. And that even playing field is that as long as you use the minimum, which everybody thought it was too low when we established it in 2016, of 13,500 gallons.
Per quarter.
Per quarter, yeah. So that's like 50 gallons a day of did not
150.
150 gallons a day, which is really hard to do. So, and that's what we said back then, and now we are more efficient. So we're going to be lowering that in whatever we're doing going forward. But what happens is if you're using over 13,500 gallons, everybody is paying the same price per gallon or per 1,000 gallon. If you're using 20,000 gallons or 200,000 gallons, you're paying the same price. The problem is with the people who are the really low-end users, which is why we should lower it, is we need a connection fee. There is a set cost to have the water and sewer come to your house. So we have to recover that set fee. And so if you don't use 13,500 gallons, you're paying more per gallon. We are, and I think Paul and I were floating when we were doing all of these things, a discussion to get rid of that inequity. Yeah. But right now, what it was, and believe it or not, from the old committee, it shifted the onus of the major part of the expenditures of the water and sewer plant to the larger users. And it made it less expensive for the individual residents, even the ones who are paying more per gallon than the big users. But we ended up, there was something in there that it became fairer to the small users, and now we have to realign that to make it as fair as we can, because that's what has gone out of whack as the use has dropped. And of course, the other thing is the more meters you install, the lower the use gets, which means the higher your bill is going to get, because we still have the same carrying costs. So, if you want to ask, your bill will never go down, but, hopefully we will never see an increase like what we've been seeing. So, did I really confuse people in that answer?
We'll know in a few minutes. Are there other comments from the council members before we start checking in with community residents?
We are a task force.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I should have changed opposite sides of the table to remember who I'm talking with here.
Sure. What I did while they were doing all that was I gathered other municipal comparable rate structures from towns across Vermont. I think we have about 15 different municipalities that we drew from, and just gathered their rate information for both the base rates, which are those fixed quarterly flat fees, and their usage or variable rates. For some of them were in different units, so we had to convert to the per 1,000 gallon charge that we use in Newport. And so some of these towns include, anything from Williston, Bristol, Rutland City, St. Albans, Brandon, Waterbury, Manchester, Middlebury, Vergennes, Heinsberg, Stowe. And so we have comparables for both water and sewer rate structures across the state. This is not comprehensive. It's not every town. Obviously, many towns don't have water or sewer services. But we pulled from our general region, towns or cities of similar population size, and a few outliers that have more dense development as we project into the future with how Newport can support development. And so it includes anything from residential and commercial to industrial rates. Some towns have very complicated structures like Newport. Some towns are, here's everybody's flat rate and we charge you per gallon. So we don't have that luxury because we don't have the meters. So we have very few non-metered comparables because very few communities have such a non-metered split in their breakdown. So I don't think it's worth going into these now. I think we can talk about comparable numbers if people are curious, but if anybody would like to see it, I'm happy to share.
Good to go.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Yeah, I think I just emphasized that we do have a long list of phase 2 recommendations should the council decide to have us keep going. And ultimately in the long term, the only way that we're going to really be able to have any degree of accuracy about any of this is to have everybody metered. So that's absolutely a priority.
Okay, so let's just open things up. I see John's hand. I'm just going to ask you to stand so that the room can hear you. You don't have to come to the middle, but just stand.
No, I don't want to come to the middle. I've been in the middle before, it's not pleasant. So, I couldn't disagree with Jennifer's synopsis more. In 2015, when I left in the June, basically, the Water and Sewer Fund had receivables from the general fund. So we weren't running a deficit at that time. So my mom, I'll just use my mom as an example. Old lady, lives alone, gets her water bills, $80-something for fixed charge, and she uses like 2,000 gallons of water, maybe a little less. So, and originally, in 2015 and before, we had a fixed charge for every living unit. And of course that spreads the fixed cost fairly. If you're a living unit, you pay the fixed cost. And of course, most of the users then were fixed cost anyway. But it's pretty easy. It's not very complicated. You've got fixed cost and you've got operational cost. The budget, I don't want to get in the budget because you can do anything you want with the budget. But bottom line is 65% is probably fixed cost. And the other remainder of that is operating cost. So you know how many gallons of water you pump, as you said. When I got here in 1999, it was like 1.4 million gallons a day. Tom did great work. I think the latest number I saw was like 800,000 gallons a day. That's because they really improved the infrastructure and you stopped leaking and you did good work. So you spread that operational cost over the 700,000, 800,000 gallons. No big deal. Use a gallon of water, you pay for it. It doesn't matter if you're commercial, industrial, or residential. You just pay for the fixed cost. Excuse me, the operational cost. Now, the fixed cost, that's you got to sort out the fixed cost. I believe every living unit should pay a fixed cost. So if you've got a 4-unit apartment house with 4 living units in it, they pay 4 times the fixed cost. We got rid of that when on Jennifer's committee back in 2015. 2 of my friends were on there. I'm not surprised what happened. But I'm a little disappointed that you haven't used the water meter data you have. You have 900 water meters, or thereabouts. You could take a sample of 200, maybe a little more if you want to get a better result, more confidence level. You could see, you categorize it by single family, each single family with a meter, each duplex with a meter for each triplex, a meter for each 4-unit. That's what you have. You put them in a spreadsheet. You can get the mean, the median, the mean usage, the median usage, and the cost. And when you look at that data, it's really useful. And you'll see right off the bat that the system's not very fair. You'll see that a 4-unit apartment house pays very little compared to the single-family home or single-family condo. Condos in Metro views have 4 buildings, 4 meters in each building. Each unit has their own water meter. Single-family residence, basically, with a meter. You look at that data, put it in a spreadsheet. You guys are sharp. You can do a spreadsheet. You run the statistics easy. Punch a button. Get the mean, median, and standard deviation. And then you can easily see what the average water user is that's metered. I'm talking residence, single family. And you can see what the average water user is for a 4-unit apartment, etc. And that gives you the idea of how you should be billing. And I think it'll stick out like a sore thumb that, geez, the apartment houses aren't paying enough for the fixed cost. If you did that, you'd find that out. It'd probably scare you. It'd scare me.
John,
Let me just finish. Let's just let it finish.
You can say I was wrong in everything I say, but I'd like to just finish.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now, it sounds smart to take cost out of the water sewer fund because you're going to claim you don't use the factor for water sewer. You know that's not true, but I get it. You want to you want to shift money to the general fund. But how does that help anybody? So you just pay it in taxes instead of water sewer fees. Non-profits in town pay water sewer fees. I think you ought to, maybe you want to think about that a little bit before you switch all costs back to the general fund. Let's see. So I'll just summarize up. I think that contrary to what Jennifer said, the single users are paying more. I don't worry about people using a lot of water. If you get so much a gallon, they pay for it. The hard part with the commercial industrials is what do they pay for a fixed fee? That would be the tough part you got to figure out. As far as you want to make it fair for, you could have a separate charge for a 1-inch water meter and a 1/2-inch water meter, different charge. You put a charge on 15 years useful life of the water meter. You put a charge on that over 15 years you collect that amount of money. Having a higher connection fees, you get building a new house, you're going to pay for a connection fee. But someone that's already connected, I don't know how you get them. Anyway, I just think that you need to spend a little time and do a spreadsheet. You got a lot of data. You got 900 meters. Use the data. You don't have to believe me. Once you do the data, do the spreadsheet, then you can even make the spreadsheet public. And it would be obvious, I think, obvious what needs to be done to collect the fixed cost and the operational cost. And that the fixed cost for my mom would go from $80-something probably down to 40 or less. So those people, those elderly people that use very little water are really getting whacked. And if you look at the numbers, you see that's the case.
Thank you,
all I gotta say.
Thank you.
I'll point out two things, which is, number one, we were given a time frame to address a very important issue. So we could not reinvent the wheel. And number two, I served on that old committee. Thank you so much, John. You were city manager when we started. I have, which I can pull up for you, a flow sheet of every single metered account in the city of Newport as of 2016. And what their usage was going back as numerous years. I think I have 2 years worth of it. We flowed that. That's how we got the rate structure we got. And you weren't around when we finally resolved the rate structure, but we looked at it, and this came out to being the fairest. I have a flow sheet that says exactly what you're going to pay based on the amount of usage. And it just, I think we can argue about this because we've done it before. We just did it 2 days ago or a day ago. Literally, I'm not going to be able to convince you, but I honestly believe we set a very good structure. We labeled it wrong. The English language was not the specialty of the committee, but I think that it is really quite fair. And you can say, some of the small users are paying a little bit higher, but that's why we lower the minimum. Otherwise, most people are literally spot on. And it's fair. I mean, you've got to realize that committee, you can speak against that committee. Every single person on that committee, their water bills went up when our new rate structure went in.
You didn't have the water meter data you have today. That's the real point.
This is true, and if we had the time, John, it's 5 weeks. I don't know about you, but most of us have lives too.
So, okay, I want to be careful not to turn this into a back and forth.
Can I also say something about
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick. John, you'll have a chance. Please let people respond.
John, I appreciate your view of taking a statistical approach to it, but the problem with our data is it's skewed. We have, over the past 8 years, likely self-selected. Those people who use little water are now on meters. And the people who use more water, and units is one way, living units is one way of doing it. But there's a lot of non-living unit hookups in town that may or may not be metered. So how do you treat those? Industrial, commercial, restaurants, the hospitals, right? So a lot of those are metered, fortunately. But the ones that aren't, remember, 42% of them are likely those hidden black box numbers that inherently consume more and have less of an incentive to become metered. And so our data that you suggest we use is already likely skewed to underbilling.
It would point to direction, that's all I'm saying.
Sure.
You know, you got a lot of good data. You should use it, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, so-
It doesn't have to be that subjective.
And the point is fair. I mean, the point that we should be as data-driven as possible is a point I think that everybody here agrees with. So one thing I want to say is that we were clear as this task force began its work, I was clear with the task force that we were asking something heroic of the task force, which was that we had about 5 weeks if we wanted to impact next year's fee structure so that we don't have another year of deficit spending. And so we were clear that the first task was to do something with as solid a rationale as possible underneath it to make an initial decision, and then the work of the task force will continue throughout the summer, and we'll have more data come in as well, because we don't fully know at this point the impact of the rate structure changes that were made last year. We're still waiting for that data to arrive, right? So my guess is that we're going to have to do some playing around with this at least next fall, and possibly this coming summer, and again next fall, and again next winter or spring. It's not a one-off. We're not doing this one time and then we walk away from it. So I just want to be clear about that. And John, I don't think anyone here would disagree with the idea that we ought to be using that data as well.
Yeah.
So I would like to point out that we have started collecting that data, but again, like Jennifer said, we're volunteers, we're doing what we can with the time we have. They need a balanced budget. That's why in the tail end of our proposal, we have asked to continue the rate analysis. This has never been intended to be a one and done. We are analyzing the data. I have all the the bulk meter data is already here. We're in the process of getting all the other stuff, but we also need city employees to help us do that. It is not feasible for a volunteer committee to go sit down in the office. So we've got to pull all that data in.
I'm not suggesting volunteers should do that. A city staff person should get that.
And
I'll just point out that that's another issue, right?
Right.
The unseen thing here going on is we also don't have anyone in our 2 key city administrative positions right now. So we put a lot of strain on the treasurer clerk's office to try and provide data, and everybody's being as cooperative as they can from staff, and we'll keep working on this.
And keep in mind, they still have the same time frame too. They're working at the same time during city business, trying to do extra at the same time. We've identified that we're going to do multi-phases. Phase 1 is to set that rate to get us to 0, and then hopefully keep us, going above. And that's where them second and third stages may come.
Another quick last question.
Go ahead.
Last time we'll talk.
Go ahead, please stand.
Too much. John, you mentioned state law, you have to bring it into compliance. I agree, but normally it wouldn't make you do it over 1 year. Is that correct or not? You have to do it over a 1 year period.
Well, there are 2 issues in terms of the budget. The immediate issue that we're looking at is, we haven't even brought up the second issue. The first issue is having the July 1, 25, June 30, 26 budget break even as opposed to run a deficit. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2, which is part of phase 2, is that we have, and Jim will tell me if I'm wrong, I hope, we have something in the neighborhood of a cumulative $1.8, $1.9 million shortfall projected as of June 30, 2025 in the water and sewer budget that's accumulated relative to prior years that water and sewer owe the general fund. That's the issue that you're probably alluding to, and we're not even addressing that at this point. That's part of phase 2. Our immediate goal is to stop further bleeding. The secondary goal, in conjunction with the finance committee, which is also looking at those issues, is to determine what methods are available to deal with the past. And we're certainly not thinking that all of that is going to happen in 1 year or that it could happen in 1 year. So the question we have is you know, how do we best go about resolving that? But that's a multi-year problem, and I see that Jim raised his hand, so.
I just want to say that you are correct, that June 30th last year, there's a little over 1.7 million in due to and from. Now that could go up or down depending on where we end this fiscal year after the audit. So, but I don't expect it to be a big swing, and it may be 100,000 here or there, 200,000, but
So
I suspect it'll go up again.
So the audited total as of June 30th, 24 then was 1.7 million?
Yeah, a little over 1.7, I believe.
1.715 due to others. It's on, I think it's on page 6, John, of the
Yeah.
audit report.
The cash at year end of 2024 in the water fund was 428,000. In the sewer fund, the cash at year end was 382,000. And you're exactly right. The 1.7 million, I looked at that number. Yeah, it's a huge number.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and if I could just say a word about that, there will be more conversation, probably in another public forum sometime in the next month, with the finance, the team that's been looking at the finance questions, because that team is trying to address what are the mechanisms we can use to get us out of deficit spending. Well, this team's dealing with the deficit spending question. That team is looking at how do we get ourselves out of a position in which we're doing everything at this point based on a line of credit, and how do we recognize the implication of that long-term deficit.
So you had a big deficit in the general fund at the end of June 30, 2024. You know that, right?
Yes.
But you haven't asked the voters for anything about that deficit, have you?
We haven't addressed any of that yet. That's exactly what the finance team is trying to look at.
So when you ask for 28%, or 36%, or 28%, and then you're going to have to ask for more money to take care of the deficit, you have to get the voters to approve that deficit.
Correct. We're going to have to.
There's some real issues. I mean,
welcome to our world.
Yeah.
There are some real issues, absolutely. So all this team is trying to do with phase 1 recommendations that need to be made by Wednesday night is make sure that next year in 25-26 we don't continue worsening the problem or deepening the problem. We address and make sure that water and sewer is at a break-even point. Simultaneously, though we can't do it on quite the same schedule, but we've got to do it between now and the end of the fiscal year. We've got to come up with a method by which we're going to deal with the financial reality that the city's facing, which, at least part of which is contributed to by the $1.715 million deficit at the end of last fiscal year for water and sewer. But I don't think that describes the entire picture. So that team, just so you know, is looking at those questions.
So real quick, Don. So the task force is not the example you used of your mother. We're not blind to that. That is a topic that we are going to delve into tomorrow in our meeting. I myself have a family member that lives, an elderly lady that lives in Newport, doesn't even have a washer and dryer, but she was told she couldn't have a meter because it would freeze. So what do we do that's fair for her, right?
I have a suggestion for that. In the current ordinance that we updated, if you can't put a meter in place, that's okay. And you try to get a fair charge.
Yeah.
So you don't abuse them. You try to have a fair charge.
Right.
Because there will be some places you might not be able to have a water meter. Yeah. I know that might sound strange, but
understood.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's.
So I mean, this is a very broad brush that we're doing. But that's why the first thing on our list for recommendations to council is to continue this, to fine tune it.
Lori?
So just a couple of things. And this is speaking to the freezing water meter. I just saw a video from a council meeting in 2021, Pam, and the gentleman who presented the information said that there is actually an attachment that can be used. Now I'm not sure because I didn't watch the whole thing, but there is some sort of attachment that can be used on water meter systems that might have the possibility of that exact thing. So I'm just saying, when I watched the video last night, that was one of the things that I remember, because there was conversation about not being able to put a water meter on everything. But I'd like to go back to the percentage numbers that you mentioned earlier, Paul, and to some stuff that Jennifer said. Because I've heard in the meetings and today about going back to the pre-28% rate for the non-metered sewer. So can we get a clearer picture of where we're starting, where everyone is starting, and the number that Paul mentioned earlier was 36% water, 23 to 25% sewer, I think that's what you said. But where are we starting? Is everybody going back to the pre-last November rate increase? Or is everybody starting at the November rate increase except for the 28% sewer?
Everybody's starting at the November rate increase, and it's a percentage onto that. Okay. With the sewer, the non-metered things, anything, well, I guess the easiest way of saying it, anything but what is the exact metered rate per 1,000 gallons has to be backed out to basically backed out of the 28%. So that goes back to the May or increase that was voted. We take those figures and we go from there and assume it's 8%. So I've got a flow sheet that's here that, you know, just shows that they're highlighted for the ones that have been changed. And there were some that there was a glitch that I did not first come up with. So your draft is.
Yeah, he's gonna. It's right. It needs to be tweaked, but
yeah.
It's a.
I've got a revised one that might work, but I don't know.
Yeah, but you're not. I mean,
I'm not connected. Yeah.
Yeah, this has to be tweaked. That's why it's got a big draft stamped on it.
Yeah.
Show me where you want to go on this.
Page 2?
The next page. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's.
So if you go, what we've done is the rates that are here, these are based on the 8%. And then all of the other ones.
Sewer is the lower part.
Yeah, this is sewer.
That's water. That's water.
Sewer.
Oh, sorry, okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. Go down then, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So the metered rate per gallon, that is what is actual. Paul changed this, so it's going to be confusing for some people if you look at the rate structure, but if you look at your bill, it's not that confusing. So we have a base charge, and then on the base charge, what you're paying for, it goes back to what John was saying. The fixed cost is there, so you're only paying going forward, going here for $4.20 is what you were paying, was the variable rate. After you hit that 13.5, you have the fixed rate cost, which is on the bill as a fixed base. It's not a base, it changes. Goes to $10.32. So anything over 13.5, you're paying $10.32 for. So it's a little weird, but what it is call it a connection fee. Right. And for that connection fee, you get 13,500 gallons on your fixed cost. Your quote, it's on the bill as base. The base cost is frozen, but you are paying your variable rate that is there. So your variable rate goes up when you hit 13.5, then your base rate you will see change. And it will become the same. It technically was, but it's out of whack. You've got the residential connection fee, that's your base rate. Okay, your residential connection fee, and where is our non-metered? And the 163, if that was adjusted, those plus the gallons equal 163. So what it was every non-metered person was being charged basically the same rate, which was $13.5. I still, you know, I did this back in 2016. I still cannot explain this to 90% of the people. I guess 2% of the people can get what I'm trying to say. It is the semantics that is in there. If we could show you, and the best thing to do would be to show you a bill that is less than $13.5 and a bill that's more than $13.5. And you will see, because if you're at $13.5, everybody's paying the same, and that's equivalent to what a non-meter person is paying. Except for, we went through a rate increase where they ended up doing it to, they rounded it. So suddenly you weren't paying 23 cents, you were paying 25 cents, or you were paying a full dollar. That skewed all of the basis off by a few cents. It was only with the 28% rate that it really went haywire. So that's why we're backing it up to the old rate, assuming everybody was 8% across the board, putting those to go forward.
And that's
Did
also,
anybody understand me? Probably
and that's
not.
also why
Paul is getting there.
we are looking at revising
Yeah.
the rate structure.
In phase 2.
Phase 2,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, it would,
Right now,
Yeah.
giving you, I sat on the council when we did, you know, various things, and one of the things I think is most confusing is you raise the rates, like there was a reappraisal, and the city changed how they were voting from a tax rate to a budget. And there you were, you couldn't even figure out, you didn't have apples to go to apples. It was apples and oranges, and everybody was confused. We just figured, we're doing so much in such a quick length of time. Let's keep the same structure. Also, the data did not have to be manipulated, and there wasn't much time for manipulating the data. So we have to manipulate the data. As John's saying, we will do a deep dive. But to take Patrick's point, most of the people who jump for meters are low usage. Yeah. It's a fact.
Ann, can you just stand, please? Ann?
Oh, sure.
Hi. While I was looking around at things, I thought more seriously about the VACTA fund, and it's fabulous that you've removed it from the, you're going to be revising the new budget. A problem arises about the capital expenditure that, or the amount of money that you're allowed to charge in the water rate, anywhere from 0 to 15% for capital expenditures you hope to be making in the future. And that is that that's the only place where the residents get to say yay or nay. So that's got to go out, in my mind, if you look at the statute, it's got to go out to the residents to vote on whether they agree with 5% or 15%. And when I look back, it turns out that you have, the city has money in the VACTA fund that, as I look back, never was approved of by the citizens of the city. And in some years, like in 22, 23, the budget contained $65,000 to go into the VACTA fund. And $65,000 actually went into the VACTA fund at a time when the budget says it was now, we were minus 200 and something thousand dollars deficit. Well, it seems so totally wrong when you were at a deficit of minus 200,000 to put $70,000 into the VACTA fund. A, it doesn't exist legally, according to what I can read, but two, it shouldn't have happened. And then later on, I think it's in 20, if I get my dates right, in 23 to 24, the budget said, put $80,000 into the VACTA fund. And actually, they put $80,000 into the VACTA fund when the deficit on the books, it was going to be $392,000 at that time. So you were at a negative of minus 400,000, and 80,000 nonetheless went in to the Vector Fund, making, you know, the deficit would have been $80,000 less. I don't know what happened in 24, 25. $100,000 was listed to go into the Vector Fund. I don't know, because we don't have the actuals here. Did it happen? We now know it's not going to happen in 25, 26. But there's, and in the water budget, only $20,000. That happened once in the water budget when it was at deficit. It was $20,000. So there's a total of 65, 80, and 20, $165,000 that went into the Vector Fund that I would say should never have gone in, and is available to do something with, either now or later, a little later, but it should be looked at. And I don't agree with John that what the committee or anybody is suggesting is that a Vector truck sucks up things. I have to think about it, what it really does. A Vector truck is going to be paid for by the general fund. Nobody's suggesting that. The Vector Fund would be paid for either by the capital fund that would be legally created, or by a loan that we would take out over a period of time, and that the statute recognizes as an appropriate way to pay for a large ticket item. So one or the other. And the only part of the Vector truck that would be paid for by the general fund would be how much of it is used for non-water and non-sewer purposes. But I do think that there's a clump of money that should be readily available. And since the fund wasn't created legally, I assume the money can be thrown out without going to the citizens. Because if it had been created legally, you'd have to go to the citizens to take it out for any other purpose other than what it was created for. But just thoughts for Monday or subsequently.
So I just want to speak to that, mostly to just try and make sure other people in the room understand what we're talking about. And because I take your points, I think they're thoughtful and well made. Just so everybody knows, what we're talking about here is the practice that our department heads, and particularly Tom, has had in Public Works, of trying to plan ahead for large capital expenditures and to make sure that we don't get hit with that expenditure 4, 5, 6 years down the road, having done no preparation and then having to figure out a way to pay for it. So the practice for a number of years has been for department heads to say, I'm going to put aside $60, $80, $100,000 each year in preparation for this $600,000 plus expense on a new Vector truck that sucks debris out of holes that we're digging to keep our workers safe and to make them more efficient, right? That's what we're talking about. And those funds have been sometimes placed in what was called a sinking fund, which is effectively a fund committed by council to be used for that purpose. Okay? And sometimes it got funded fully in the year that it was put aside, and sometimes it didn't. So I think, Tom, if I remember correctly, the calculation on the Vector Fund, which I think is a very good example, it's very real, is that right now, if we had put aside all the money that Tom suggested we should put aside, it would be somewhere around $440,000, right? But in fact, what's actually in that fund at the moment is $160,000. So one thing that the finance group is looking at is how much money is sitting in those accounts right now, and whether that's a source of fund to help us with our short-term cash flow issues. Because that money is not legally restricted by an outside entity. It's a commitment by a council that can be reversed by this council if need be. So stay tuned, because we'll be coming back for a conversation about that over the next month or certainly 2 months anyway. But for the purposes of this conversation, all that Paul and Jennifer have done, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because we haven't spoken since Friday when you all were working on this again, but all that I understand that they've done is said, we are going to remove the line for the year 25-26 that was proposing we put another, how much was it? Do y'all remember?
75.
Another $75,000 or $80,000 in that sinking fund for the Vector truck. 140. And we're gonna, instead of pretending that money, can go into that fund right now, we're gonna say we have bigger fish to fry at the moment, knowing that we got a Vector truck that's gonna be at the end of its useful life in another year to 2 years. We're gonna have to deal with that problem also. But they're just saying, for the moment, all we're doing to try and ease the burden on the ratepayers is we're gonna remove that projected saving for that future expenditure from next year's budget, and we'll come back to a conversation about what to do about that. Have I said that correctly?
Yes. And we have run scenarios with, no capital, no VAC, no capital reserve, VAC, no capital, we've run all the scenarios. So we have budget numbers, a 5% capital reserve doesn't amount to, like in water, it amounts to $50,000. It's not, it's not a ton of money. So, but I guess I'll look to John for the statute on that, whether, if that does need to go to the voters, that capital reserve, then we'll just.
Well, one of the questions we don't know the answer to is what's been done in past years in terms of reserves. And the only way that we're really going to figure that out is to work our way back through years of annual meetings that we haven't had time to look at. I know, starting back from the very beginning, one of the documents I have is the 1923 Newport City Water Ordinance, which sets up a capital reserve. And it wasn't targeted toward a specific purpose. At that time, it was targeted toward expansion of the system into new neighborhoods and replacement of essentially, capital assets as opposed to operating, if a pump failed, for instance, that sort of thing. But there have been reserves established at least since 1923. So we don't at this point have enough information as to what happened between 1993 and 2025 in terms of reserve creation to know what reserves have already been appropriately approved and legally exist. And I think we probably need to know the answer to that question before we know what we're going to put before the voters. Because if it's already been approved, it's set. But.
And my understanding, John, please correct me if I'm wrong about this, is that it's actually two different acts. The council acts as the water commissioners, and they set the budget, and with your endless pleas in mind, they approve the budget, right? And they're going to do that on Wednesday night. They're going to be given a budget to approve. And that budget can absolutely include up to a 15%, 15% of what? Somebody help me, what's the language?
It's a formula, but it's 15% of basically fixed operating costs.
Fixed operating, thank you.
And that's
to put aside for future capital expenditures, okay? We can do that as water commissioners without permission from voters. Yet, we may disagree, and believe me, we won't make a single move without getting clear indication, but I've talked with the lawyers this week about this. And my initial indication is that water commissioners can make that choice. The legal requirement, if I understand it correctly, and I may not, I'm still working on it, is as you suggest, the creation of the actual fund that has to be, or that needs to be instituted for that money to actually be set aside every year. So in that instance, we have, as I understand it, permission, we have the authority as council and water commissioners to create short-term mechanisms by which that money can be set aside and protected. But as a long-term strategy, that's a question, as I understand it, that would have to go to the voters. So there's more to be learned about that, but that's a fairly significant conversation I had this week with the attorneys.
And the same principle applies to sewer as well.
That's right.
It's not restricted to water. The same concept applies on the sewer side.
Thank you. What other questions? Jennifer, go ahead.
Just to respond to your statements. I know the statutes changed recently, and I haven't familiarized myself with what, if any, changes were made, but based on what they were a year ago, what you just said is spot on. That by statute, you're able to do that percentage and put it into a sinking fund. So I would concur with that. My comment, it pertains more to phase 2. As Ms. Hopkins was trying to make her presentation, I think that it probably just in and of itself spoke to the complexity of the current rate schedule, and it speaks to the number of people, both residents as well as previous administrators, that really did not understand the rate structure because it's so complicated. I dove into it some time ago, and I have a firm grasp of it. And the way that I describe it is that there is no fixed rate. They're both variable rates. The difference in the fixed base rate is that there's an artificial floor built into it, so it can never go below the amount that would attach to 13,500 gallons. That's the lowest that fixed base rate can go. But as Ms. Hopkins, just said, once you hit that 13,500 mark, watch out, because it kicks in, and it kicks in with a vengeance. Because the fixed base rate, which in my opinion is a variable rate, is much higher than the usage rate, which is the variable usage rate. So it just at, and I remember when the water tower came up, the council president at that time was saying there was going to be a $9.86 fixed amount that was going to get added to the fixed base rate, and I was trying to explain that can't happen because it's really a variable rate, and it was just chaos. And so we need to get rid of that, in my opinion. The fixed base rate needs to be the fixed base rate, and everybody pays it. It's a connectivity fee is the term that I have used. And so whatever it takes to keep the lights on, that amount needs to be divided out among the users, and whether there's a difference between a commercial and a residential, that's for you guys to decide. But it needs to be divided out amongst the residents and the commercial users in an equitable way, and it needs to stay the same. So every time you get a bill, that connectivity fee is going to be there, because that's what it takes to keep the system operational. And then have one usage rate, know?
I don't think, Jennifer, you were here when if you could call that list up, that's page 3 of that.
Yeah, and by the way, the door was locked downstairs, that's part of the reason.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It took us a while, but we worked it out.
So
Where are we here, Paul? What do you want?
So it's all number 1. It's number 1 on our phase 2 list.
Oops.
Is to redevelop this rate structure.
Top of the next page. It's
pretty much close to what you were saying is what we're thinking. But yeah, so there's, we've got, this is just a draft, we've got tweaks to it, but that is on our list for.
The one other thing that I think the members of the council should be aware is that fixed base rate floor or whatever was set because it was reverse engineered. And so at that point in time, everybody that had a water connection, they were receiving a bill, and if my memory serves me correctly, it was $171.89. And when they shifted to the meters, they wanted to protect the empty nesters in Newport, because that was the most common occurrence, was a 2-person household. And so they reverse engineered the rate system so that if a 2-person household existed, using what the state average for a 2-person household would be, 13,500 gallons, their bill would end up being $171.89. So they would experience no change whatsoever in their water bill. And I worked all the numbers and worked them back, and it worked out to the penny of 171.89 if you use 13,500 gallons. And while the spirit of that may have been honorable, I do believe it is misplaced, and that cannot be the focus. And that I think a more equitable way to approach it is, as I stated, to have whatever it takes to keep the lights on, and then you pay for what you use thereafter. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Other comments or questions, ideas that we should be hearing before our final meeting tomorrow night? Not final in phase one. Ronald, go ahead.
Is there a list available to us of who is not metered?
Yes.
There is a list that exists of the people who are on metered and the who are on meters and the people who are not. Yes.
Is that available to the public?
Not yet. No.
I don't know. I have to.
Unfortunately, the only way I know you can get it easily is that they have a printout of all the bills. So I think that becomes dicey for public records. I think they probably could print out just the accounts, but we've been dealing with, Stacy has done the water and sewer billing mainly. She's done it for years and years. Robin's very good. Jim does some of it. Stacy has been on vacation this week, so we've been operating with our hands tied behind the back for sure on that one. But there are, they can bring it up. They can bring up an individual. If there's an individual, they know, obviously. But I don't know whether they could produce a concise printout without the bills. The problem is with the bills, you can't even get the gallon usage on it. You have to back figure the gallon usage on all of those bills.
So one thing about that list that you got to be careful with is that there are people on that non-meter list that have been asking for meters.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Right, you can't assume motive about anybody in any direction at this point, right?
So to your question, one thing that we talked about doing as part of the phase two, and it's not on this list, but it probably should be, is looking into that data and prioritizing, trying to come up with a priority list from the unmetered subset as to where the meters should be focused first.
Right.
Based on projected use for number of outbuildings, number of the assessed value of the property, likely the structures, like where are there going to be the most potential appliances, daily usage, people in the building, or commercial uses, industrial uses. So we are trying to pull that data. It involves converting information from the actual meter reading database system, taking that, turning it into addresses, pulling those addresses out of the grand list, and then figuring out what the hell each one of those addresses has in terms of buildings, structures, improvements, potential usage. And it's all guessing game, but it's the best we can potentially do.
I want to hear the next part of your statement or question behind the question you asked. What else do you want us to be thinking about?
I'm wondering, can we make a comparison? You stated that you have data from other towns.
I will say that I never came across another town with 13,500 gallons of quarterly allocation.
Well, what would be the allocation?
I saw 4,000, I saw 6,000, I saw 9,000. It's anything over 10.
What I want to do is, compare what's going on in this town here now with what's going on in other towns that are metered. Can you do that? Can you produce that for me?
I got it right here if you want to hear some comparables.
Maybe Patrick, if you could just share a little bit about what you've done, because I think it is instructive.
I can get into that at the beginning too.
Yeah, so we are kind of coming full circle. So
I would go for a printout rather than.
I can put it up there if you want to see some.
Up people's time.
If you, if you want to email me the document, I can put it up.
I think I did an hour. Well, let me email you this one.
Oh no, I think I have that. Hold on. That's that.
This afternoon.
Was that spreadsheet?
I made one edit since then, so let me just send you a new one.
Okay.
By the way, I will point out that we have to fight to get as low as 13.5 as a base minimum. because the state still was using 225 as the lowest that they would go. We've gotten quite a bit more efficient since then, so that is something definitely on the radar. You got to realize nothing has happened with the base philosophy since 2016,
Okay.
which is 2014, 15 area.
So, and one thing on the residential meters that we do have right now, real down and dirty daily use for each residential meter is 166 gallons, which is more than the 150 that the 13.5 was based on. So, we have to look at what's in the residential. Are there apartments in the residential, you know, are there larger meters in their residential category? We've got to dig into that too.
Of course, that's the issue. Believe me, it's not 166.
No, exactly, right? So
That's the whole point.
And that leaped right off the spreadsheet at us. It's like, okay, there's stuff in here that's not residential.
The old structure.
Newport.
I know, I forwarded it.
The old structure, we built, every living unit got a fixed charge, and then with those with water meters, they paid a little more, and then the people in the water meters paid the total fixed charge. Anyway, I like this lady, Jennifer's comment, because it's exactly the right way to, I think, as you know, to look at it. It just makes it so simple and so easy. The tough part you have is what part is fixed cost and what part is operational cost. That's the subjective part that someone has to do.
Right, and that's, like we've said before, that's what we didn't have the luxury of doing to get a balanced budget for what's in front of us. That's phase 2.
Sorry, y'all, take me just another moment here.
No, that's
So, Rick, can I say something while you're looking for your stuff there?
Hold on just a second, please.
Very focused. You might need you.
Come help me.
How'd you zoom in? Okay, zoom out. All the way out.
How do we make this? Oh, there we go. Okay, that'll work. Thank you very much. So, Jennifer, please hold that thought. Let's track this question first.
So, it's kind of hard to see, but and I'm actually going to look at my own.
Yeah, I can't make it bigger either for some reason.
Yeah, it's because you're sharing, but so ultimately, there's a lot of different categories for different zoning. So there's residential rates, there's commercial rates, there's industrial rates, there's metered and non-metered rates.
Yeah.
But for instance, Williston has a very low base rate. You're paying $6 for a residential hookup every quarter.
Yeah.
Right? But they charge you $5.80 per 1,000 gallons, which is about
5 cents a gallon.
over twice what we charge currently per 1,000 gallons. So they're hitting you with your usage rate really heavy and billing you a very small operational cost, right? You're fixed.
Right, but that's if you're in the 13,500 or under, because in our rate schedule, you've got the 420 plus the 265 or whatever it is, so we'd be above them after 13,000.
Yeah, but they only allocate you 4,000 gallons.
Right,
And then you
I
pay
get that.
for-
So there's this in-between period, but for those that hit 13.5, we're actually above Essex.
Williston, sure.
Or Williston.
Sure. And then, for instance, Waterbury Village, or no, we'll go to Manchester. Manchester, which is a similar population to Newport, $54 per quarter flat fee compared to $5.57 per 1,000 gallons. So that's pretty comparable with what you would pay for using over 13,500 gallons in Newport right now without the increases being adjusted. Randolph, they charge you $10 per 1,000 gallons. That's a lot. That's 4.5 times what we're charging per 1,000 gallon currently, or based on the unadjusted rates. And then I don't even know what town they are, Randolph. But they only charge, and they're still charging you $45 per quarter. So $2 you save in Randolph per quarter, but you're paying $10 per 1,000 gallons. So overall, we are, with these proposed adjustments, 36% adjustment to water, you know, we're looking at, we're above Manchester, we're below half of St. Albans in terms of our base fee. The folks who would be higher than us would be, and that's for metered. For non-metered, we're actually higher. I only have four data points for non-metered. It's not easy to get that, but we're lower than Stowe. We can say that. But we're higher than Heinsberg, and we're at par with St. Albans. So we're not unreasonably high.
No.
We're just playing a lot of catch up. You know.
And the other thing to think about with these rates that Patrick collected here is we haven't broken down whether it's a well system, whether they're treating surface water.
Yeah.
All that plays a role in what their rate is.
Brandon, for instance, they have a hard time making water.
Right. You know, like Williston buys its water from the Champlain Water District, so that they can do a very base fee because they pay their water bill to the Champlain Water District every month, so they just take a chunk of what you paid them and pass it on. It's totally, you know, so all that plays a role in that.
I can also share some sewer if you're really curious. We can talk sewer, but you have a question, so go ahead.
I just want to take a step back as I'm listening to the comparison with other municipalities. And assuming that the statutes haven't completely changed with the revisions that went in July, just remind everybody at the table that the statutes drive how you are supposed to set your rates. And the statutes tell you that you have to set your rates based on your expenses.
Correct.
So while it is worthwhile, I think in a level of the forest analysis to say, okay, how are we doing with other municipalities? Sure. That cannot be the basis upon which your choices are made to set the rates. You have to do it based on your personal expenses to be in compliance
Right
with
with
statute.
you. And everybody at this table is
Perfect.
We knew that.
Just checking in.
Really, the only reason we provided this and did the labor is so that you all don't feel cheated and like you got greener pastures somewhere else.
Okay.
You know, it's
Fair
just,
enough.
yeah.
And I've got
Go ahead, Paul.
if somebody wants to, I've got a copy here of the task force created budget. If people want to look at it, sorry, I did not
It will be
make a bunch.
That will be public Monday night online with the materials we're using to warn the special meeting on Wednesday night anyway. So if you go online, you'll have access to that document.
And I can share this if you want as well, sir. If you want.
Before we go to Ann, any further questions, Ronald? Do you want to follow that line of questioning any further, or are we done there?
Well, I'm wondering, are you allowed to, give the people who don't have a meter some kind of financial incentive, a penalty for not having a meter? Are you allowed to do that by the statutes?
Sounds like they did that last fall. They punished us.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, right? I mean, it's true that...
Now you're talking about going back and undoing what you did last fall.
Which is incentive not to get a meter, right?
Which is incentive not to get a meter, right?
Well, I wouldn't say so, because ultimately you're going to be paying non-metered. You got like close to $200 for sewer.
Right.
You want metered. If you're not getting if you don't have 10 kids, you want a meter, you know?
Yeah, I know, I got a meter, so I wouldn't be subsidizing the people who, you know, who I'm subsidizing. Like, if you pay $10 for 1,000 gallons, that's a penny a gallon, right?
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think that's the math I did the last time.
Routinely, I'm paying 20 cents a gallon right now. If I take my whole bill, I'm paying 20 cents a gallon.
You do the math.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not, you know,
Yeah.
I understand some of it is fixed cost, but,
Right. So I'll just say, to be continued, right? I mean, that's all phase 2 conversation. Right?
Okay.
Right, so, and feel free, these meetings are public, are open to the public, and we've been very free and easy about folks who show up at these meetings participating in the conversation. So they will continue, and y'all are welcome.
well, I'm thankful that my input is longer than the 2 minutes I spent in the voting booth. Thank you.
So, and just to be clear, so am I, and I think so are all of us, right? If there's a way through this, it's going to be hearing what people really have to say about it. So, Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a comment on something that arose. I can't remember even who mentioned it, but they were talking about an ordinance to shut off the water of people who are overdue, or maybe people who don't agree with going with a meter. But I think if any ordinance like that is created, there really has to be a section of it that includes hardship, because some people aren't paying their bills because they're in a hardship situation, or maybe some of them aren't getting up to converting because of hardship. I don't know, but there's got to be a way that people who are really feeling it bad economically are not going to be punished automatically.
That's a phase 2 conversation, but the current water ordinance and the current sewer ordinance actually contain collection and enforcement mechanisms, including potential disconnection. But ultimately, whatever's done in that regard has to comply with yet another whole chapter of state law that prescribes, I'm paraphrasing because I'm going from memory, but the gist of it is it's the Uniform Water and Sewer Disconnection Procedure Act.
Okay.
And so anything that the city, the current ordinances reference that act and say that the process has to be as set forth in the act, and then obviously if there have been changes in the act since the ordinances were adopted, that's a legitimate subject of updating. But yes, we're cognizant of those issues.
But what we're trying to address are connections that owe in 5 digits and are refusing entry to fixed meters.
Jim, you had something you wanted to say about this?
I don't know, I think John can confirm this, but I think the city tried that years and years ago, shut somebody off, and I think it becomes a health hazard, so I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, it's a health hazard. Well, you get a call from the health department, and then you get scared because you don't want to get sued. And so we just have a tax sale. You don't pay your bill, you have a tax sale. And so we're going to get the money. At least that's what we did, and it seemed to work.
So all the towns that I worked with in Chittenden County shut people off.
Yeah,
you would get a call at night, and they would have money waiting for you when you showed up to turn them back on.
They're not as nice as we are.
Like I said, this is all to be continued, right? We need that conversation too. I see a hand from Claire, and then I'm going to begin to try and wrap us up, folks. It's been a long conversation, and we've got other things to do tonight, I'm sure, all of us. Go ahead, Claire. Claire, if you could just stand, please, as you need.
My comment is for next phases, all right? I've owned homes and everything for over 50 years. And for 50 years, I have been getting questions from my utilities saying, we think something's wrong because your usage is way too low. So there's got to be something wrong. We have to come out and we have to check. Well, I'm one of those who listen to Jimmy Carter and put on my sweaters and turn down my thermostat, and then gradually over the years, I increased that to all the other utilities and everything. You have access to my address. You can look up my bill. I'm not even gonna say what it is out loud here because it'll make too many people mad. But that's because I work at it. I'm retired. I don't have a family. It's just me. And I work at it. And I've been able to do it. And lots of it isn't that difficult. But nobody wants to listen. Because my neighbor doesn't have to do that, so I shouldn't have to do that. And, but think about something in the future to give an incentive for people to get their meters to reduce their usage. Okay?
That's what we tried to do with the old rates, yes.
Okay. Now, I know it's not for right now, but I'm saying, I'm an example. Look up my water and sewer.
You aren't the only one who's a low usage. You might be super low, but there are a whole lot of low or slightly low.
But just, you know, it's...
One thing that we're grappling with is like, this is great, efficiency all the way, but that's like revenue down. You know?
I understand, and I haven't complained, and I'm not complaining now. But you look at my rate, at least the last bill I got.
Just wait for the next one, Claire. We'll take it.
But it's the maintenance is sky high. But you look at my usage and then divide by 90 and find out how much I'm using per day.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha point. So I see a few more hands. Is there something people want to say here first?
One thing to address that, in trying to come up with the rates, there are there are flow sheets that are there that have figures on them. And it's one of the things that we did find, and Paul had some bum data that I found at 5 o'clock on Friday night, which skewed our figures by quite a bit. It was another meter that was bonkers. And we've had one whole time with those things. When you bank those out, almost everybody, you could just say everybody who has a meter technically is using less than what we have for a floor right now. And so they are saving on at least what is termed the variable usage right now, and they are just paying this, sort of fixed cost, which is what we have to do. So I think that, by fluke, but it was surprising. It was surprising how many, and why Patrick says serving that we're going to have low.
And I'm not complaining.
No, we didn't hear a complaint.
No. I'm not complaining about that.
Jennifer, I see your hand. I'm going to hold on for a minute, okay? Were you trying to speak, Muriel?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, I saw you moving your hand.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Real quick, sorry. I understand John was joking around, but to that point, I just want to point out that you may be nicer, but we never had a deficit, and when I left, we had a $10 million capital reserve fund, right? So there is being nice, which we were. There are hardship cases, but at some point you have to draw the line and say enough is enough, right?
We didn't have a deficit when I was here.
I'm not saying,
Okay. Actually, I don't want to go down that road.
Right, and that's not what I'm saying, where we are now, right?
I got it.
Right. So
We had 2 tax bills a year.
Yeah.
So we got the money timely.
Okay. Lori has a quick comment, Jennifer, and then we're going to try and wrap up.
I just want to say, as part of the financial committee, I've been in contact with someone who's been doing the same kind of stuff for about 25 years in Colorado. And we are not alone. Newport is not alone at all. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of communities, small communities like ourselves, that are going through this exact same thing. As a matter of fact, the one she lives in has not had new water meters in 20 years, and they're getting ready to change everybody in her city. So we are not alone. The other thing is, I've been here for 99% of the meetings that they've had, and I just want to say thank you, because you are doing a great job at digging in and looking and finding, and I expect that you will continue that.
Thank you, Lori. Jennifer?
I just want to dovetail off of what Lori said. I remember how many hours it took me to actually get my brain wrapped around our current rate schedule, and it was not a small number. And I look at what you guys are doing over and above even that, and I mean, the time you're putting in has got to be astronomical, and it's got to be a real burden on your, you know, your personal lives. And so we are blessed to have you doing this job and doing it at the level that you are doing it. This is not a superficial thing that you're I can hear just from the discourse. You are digging in and you are getting to the heart of it. And we are absolutely super fortunate to have you volunteer your time in this regard, because this is rough stuff. So thank you.
Well, then I'm going to take, any other comments from the council, or, sorry, from the task force?
I just want to say that I'm honored to work with this task force.
Thank you.
They are doing fantastic work, and in the short time that we have, we're going to achieve good things here for the future. You just have to trust the numbers that we're going to come up with. That's the only way. That's the only way forward.
Thank you. Amy, did you want to say something?
No, I don't want to say, I want to ask, is there a charge for the meters?
A charge for,
The meters?
Putting in the meters.
Yeah.
to put the meters in currently? There's no charge. No. Of course, there's also no money to put more meters in at the moment. We got to figure that out. It's not like we're sitting on a big pile of meters somewhere.
There's incentives on both sides.
So listen, I want to finish us with this. I do appreciate the appreciation that's been expressed on behalf of the community to the members of this task force, and I wholeheartedly agree. And I want to thank all of you for coming out for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon for this conversation, and I want to ask for your help, because the fact that there are only, about 20 of us in the room actually concerns me, because there are a lot of people in this community who are going to be impacted by whatever decisions get made Wednesday night and whatever decisions we continue to make. And one thing I would ask is that you all are key, because you have neighbors and you speak with people, and I would just ask you to help us make sure that people are dealing with good information, because an awful lot of bad information gets spread quickly about what's going on and how it's taking place. And please refer people to NEK-TV. If they have questions, they can see this and any other deliberation that's gone on till now. And just take advantage when you hear people speak in a way that makes you think, gosh, maybe there's information you don't have here. Please make sure they talk to one of us or go watch the videos themselves, so that we're at least all dealing with good information as we work on this together. Okay? And I want to thank you all for coming this afternoon. I think that concludes our meeting.
I think so, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.